The family of a missing Sydney mother has made an emotional plea following her mystery disappearance 4 days ago. They're desperate for help, fearing for the safety of the woman who's 3 months pregnant.
On the 7th of January 2006, 26-year-old Jody Galante, who was 3 months pregnant and the mother of a 2-year-old daughter, was reported missing. Her family, including her husband Mark, appeared on national television, weeping and begging for help in finding her.
We're really worried about you, your family, everyone's worried. Let someone know you're alright, please.
But as the days passed, darker questions began to surface. Had Jody run away? Had she fallen victim to a random attack? Or was the danger much closer to home? On January 7th, 2006, 26-year-old Jody Galante, who was 3 months pregnant at the time, went missing. Her husband, Mark Galante, called Jody's mum using Jody's phone and told her that Jody hadn't come home. Jody and Mark had been high school sweethearts. They were married, raising their 2-year-old daughter Zayla, and now preparing to welcome another baby. Mark said he had dropped Jody off at the busy Parkley markets that morning, but when he returned to pick her up, she wasn't there. He said he tried calling her phone again and again, but got no answer. From the start, Jody's family knew something was wrong. She would never leave without a word, especially now, while she was pregnant. A missing person report was quickly filed with police, and the search for Jody began right away.
If you hear anything, just call Quakers Hill Police Station.
Over the next few days, the investigation grew, and the entire community rallied together to help. Jody's family, along with her husband Mark, made emotional public appeals. On January 11th, 2006, Mark appeared on national television as a distraught husband. With Jody's mother and sister standing beside him, he sobbed as he begged viewers to come forward with any information that could help find his angel.
Jody, yourself, if you see this, please just let someone know as soon as possible you're okay.
This is a photograph of her and Zayla. She loves her family very much. There is no reason for us to suspect or believe that she would disappear for any reason. Her family.
About 21, sorry.
Just a week after her disappearance, on January 14th, 2006, the search for Jody came to a devastating end. Her decomposed body was discovered on a secluded bushland track in Bilpin, deep in the Blue Mountains region. Police had been conducting aerial searches, and it was from a helicopter that her body was finally spotted. The grim discovery revealed that Jody had been shot in the back of the head. With this, everything changed. What began as a desperate search for a missing woman was now a homicide investigation. Police immediately declared the Galantes' home a crime scene. Detectives stressed that they weren't ruling out any suspects, but they remained tight-lipped about whether they were close to making an arrest. Finding Jody in this state sent shockwaves through the community, and Jody's family was left reeling with grief. In the days after Jody's body was found, her family began to notice unsettling cracks in Mark's behaviour. He often appeared emotional, but family members realised his displays of grief rarely included actual tears. Behind closed doors, some already doubted his story. They knew Jody would never have abandoned her daughter or her family, not willingly, not ever. Police, meanwhile, were following their own leads. Investigators uncovered CCTV footage placing Mark's car between his home and the remote area of Bilpin where Jody's body was found. Mark had told police he had spent the day in the Stanhope Gardens area, but the footage showed his vehicle near Richmond railway station, about halfway between his residence and Bilpin. That wasn't all. Forensic teams also matched vegetation found underneath Mark's car to the bushland near the crime scene. Piece by piece, Mark's alibi was falling apart, and suspicion around him grew stronger. During this time, Jody and Mark's daughter, little Zayla, went to stay with Jody's sister. It was a deeply confusing and frightening time for the 2-year-old, and she would sometimes wake in the middle of the night screaming. Slowly, she began to open up to her aunt. One night, she blurted out words that chilled her family to the core. "Daddy hurt Mummy. Daddy went bang and Mummy went flop. Mummy's up in the area." These disturbing statements from the toddler immediately raised red flags. Jody's mother and sister went straight to investigators and told them their concerns. In truth, they had never trusted Mark. They knew Jody and Mark had been having serious problems, and they had always believed he was no good for her. Jody and Mark's story went all the way back to high school. Jody's brother was best friends with Mark's brother, and since Jody and Mark were in the same year, and Mark lived just up the street, their paths crossed often. Jody was bubbly, outgoing, and full of life, but underneath that, she never had much confidence in herself. She often felt like she wasn't as good as everyone else, and Mark seemed to pick up on that vulnerability, even back in school. When Jody later asked her sister whether she should marry Mark, her sister told her no, but Jody went ahead anyway.
Friends, we are gathered here today to witness Mark's and Jody's commitment to each other.
Even on their wedding day, the cracks were already showing. Family remembered how Mark was high on drugs, and the couple were fighting before the reception had even finished. At one point, Jody was in the bathroom, crying her eyes out after another argument. Her sister recalled, "Maybe the facade slipped a little bit that day. I think for him it was like, it's almost over, I've almost got her. I won't have to keep being that nice romantic bloke anymore."
Yeah, me and Joe first met when we were about 15 or so. We lost contact and didn't see each other for about 4 or so years. Eventually I tracked Joe down and we caught up for lunch one day, and it all started all over again. This time I won't be here for a year or two, and hopefully it'll be forever. Love you, Joe.
After the wedding, communication between Jody and her family dropped away drastically. Mark became increasingly controlling. The Galante home was always shut tight, curtains drawn, blinds closed, doors locked. Family weren't allowed in certain areas. That included the bedroom, where Mark kept his computer, and the garage, where he smoked and stored his marijuana plants. By then, Mark had grown into an intensely introverted man. To Jody's family, he seemed controlling, dominating, and dangerous to be married to. Jody herself wasn't allowed much freedom. She couldn't go anywhere on her own. Mark would drive her to work in the mornings, pick her up in the afternoons, and call during the day to make sure she was still there. Even when Jody gave birth to their daughter Zayla, Mark's behaviour didn't change. In fact, it got worse. Family weren't welcome at the hospital, but Jody's sister went anyway, and when she arrived, Jody was still in the delivery suite, bloody and exhausted, without even having had a shower yet. Her sister helped her clean up, care for the newborn, and rest for a moment. But even then, Mark called, demanding Jody come home that same night. He was angry and abusive on the phone. Jody, still in pain, still unable to breastfeed, was forced to leave the hospital early, in tears, because Mark insisted. After Jody's death, the focus of the investigation only sharpened. While police publicly stressed they were keeping an open mind, behind the scenes they were increasingly convinced that Mark was their prime suspect. Around this time, Jody's funeral was held. Mark attended, presenting himself as a grieving husband.
I promise with every beat of my heart that we will find who did this to you. I will not rest or sleep or forget till that is done.
Thank you for making me laugh and cry. As today, I say goodbye.
He wept in public, professed his love for Jody, and told police and the media that he had no idea what had happened, insisting again and again that he would never hurt her, but by now, many weren't convinced. During this period, Jody's mother and sister acted as quiet informants for police. They kept up a facade of civility with Mark, even pretending to play happy families, while privately reporting everything he said and did. Later, Jody's sister recalled how difficult it was, describing the act of spending time around Mark as something that left her feeling dirty, as though she needed to scrub herself clean at the end of each day. As the investigation progressed, troubling facts came to light. Jody had confided to friends and family that she was unhappy in the marriage and had even thought about leaving. She had also told people that Mark was angry about her second pregnancy. Not only did he not want another child, but he had irrationally accused her of cheating, questioning whether the baby was even his. Police discovered that Mark was a heavy marijuana user, and Jody had often fought with him about it. Neighbours and acquaintances remembered explosive arguments between the couple, and the possibility that Mark could have turned violent no longer seemed far-fetched. Then they uncovered even darker details. Despite playing the role of a devoted husband, Mark himself had been unfaithful. Police learned that in late 2005, just 2 months before Jody's death, he had met a woman in an online chat room and had an affair with her. Detectives also uncovered a financial motive. Mark stood to gain almost $600,000 from Jody's life insurance policy, a payout he denied even knowing about when asked directly. At the same time, he was also pushing for formal visitation rights with his daughter, which alarmed Jody's family, who feared he might harm little Zayla to keep her quiet. Police then uncovered evidence that pointed directly to premeditation. They learned that as far back as 3 months before the murder, Mark had been trying to obtain a gun. Their investigation led to a man named Dave, a tradesman and recreational hunter who had a history of drug use. Mark had met him through mutual acquaintances and quickly pressed him about acquiring a firearm. At first, Dave brushed him off, but after repeated calls and pressure, he eventually agreed to help. Through a friend, Dave sourced an unregistered .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol, known as a hit gun because it was small, light, and easy to conceal. Mark paid around $9,000 for the weapon and ammunition just weeks before Jody's death. By early 2006, police had strong suspicions that this was the gun used to kill Jody, but they still hadn't recovered it. Investigators persuaded Dave to cooperate. They wired him with a listening device and sent him to meet Mark at a local pub. During that meeting, Mark admitted to buying the pistol. He told Dave that he had cut it into pieces with an angle grinder and dumped the parts in different locations to avoid it being found. Then finally, Mark confessed directly to Dave that he had in fact killed Jody. With that admission, police finally had what they needed. And on March 1st, 2006, just 2 months after Jody's murder, detectives arrested Mark Galante and charged him with his wife's killing.
Good evening. A Sydney man who made tearful pleas for help in finding his missing wife has been charged with her murder.
He was denied bail as the grim details of the actual murder began to unfold.
Interview between Detective Sergeant Agnew and Mark Galante at the Blacktown Police Station. I just want to remind you that you're not obliged to say or do anything, but whatever you say or do will be electronically recorded and may later be used in evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Under interrogation, Mark eventually confessed. He admitted not only to killing Jody, but also to carefully planning her murder. He told police that he had sourced a firearm months earlier, in October 2005, and that the day before the killing, he carried out a dummy run to Bilpin, scouting out the remote bushland track where he would take her life. Then, on January 7th, under the pretense of a normal shopping trip, Mark loaded Jody and their 2-year-old daughter Zayla into the car, but instead of driving to the markets as he claimed, he diverted onto a fire trail in the bush. According to his own account, he pulled off the road on the excuse that he needed to use the toilet. He then lured Jody to the back of the vehicle, pretending to show her something in the boot. With Zayla strapped in her car seat just meters away, Mark retrieved the gun and fired a single shot into the back of Jody's head.
Did Jody say anything to you before you shot her?
I don't know.
What were you thinking at this stage?
I don't know.
He claimed that his daughter had been asleep in the back seat at the time.
You said Zayla was asleep. Did she wake up at all?
Mark made no attempt to conceal Jody's body. He left her lying where she fell, in the middle of the dirt track. before driving away with his toddler still in the car. In the days that followed, he used an angle grinder to cut the pistol into pieces, disposing of the fragments in different suburbs around his Stanhope Gardens home in an effort to erase the evidence. While awaiting trial, Mark continued to maintain his innocence in public. With no plea deal reached, the case seemed certain to go before the Supreme Court. During this time, custody of little Zayla was granted to Jody's family. They later shared how fearful those months were. Knowing Mark had not yet been convicted, they worried he might somehow harm the child or others. Then, on February 18th, 2008, everything changed.
A Sydney man who made desperate public appeals to find his wife's killer has now pleaded guilty to her murder. Mark Galante claimed he'd last seen his pregnant wife Jody after dropping her outside the Parklea markets in January 2006. His guilty plea has come just before the start of his murder trial. Galante will be sentenced next month.
On the very morning his trial was scheduled to begin, Mark abruptly changed his plea to guilty in the New South Wales Supreme Court. After more than 2 years of denials, he finally admitted he had murdered his pregnant wife, but claiming that he had been mentally ill at the time of the killing. The guilty plea meant no full trial would take place. Instead, the case moved directly into sentencing, which took place a month later, in March 2008. Prosecutors argued that Jody's desire to leave the marriage and to take their daughter with her was the driving force behind the killing. They described the murder as carefully premeditated, fueled by Mark's need for control. Mark himself admitted as much, telling investigators that he killed Jody because she was going to leave him and he wasn't going to have it. Jody's family delivered devastating victim impact statements. Her mother spoke about the misery and pain of losing her daughter and the horror of knowing her own son-in-law, the man who had stood at Jody's funeral professing his love, was her killer all along. Justice Michael Adams condemned the crime in the strongest terms. He described it as a calculated, cold-blooded murder by a husband of his pregnant wife because she wanted to leave him and take their child. He said it was a very grave crime and much worse than most murders. Finally, on April 11, 2008, Justice Adams sentenced 29-year-old Mark Galante to 27 years in prison with a non-parole period of 20 years. Mark showed no visible emotion as the sentence was handed down. In the courtroom, Jody's mother, Julianne Hand, broke down in tears of relief, crying out yes. Later she told reporters, although it won't bring Jody back, he got 1 year for every year that he took, 26 for Jody and 1 for the baby.
We will just miss her forever.
Just weeks before the murder, Jody and Mark had been captured on a Christmas home video, laughing, smiling, and opening presents with their daughter. To outsiders, it might have looked like a happy family, but behind closed doors, the reality was far different. Jody's brother later explained that she had begged Mark to stop smoking marijuana, especially once their children came along. He refused, and by the time Jody was pregnant with their second child, her family believed she had simply had enough. They saw Mark as too much of a coward to face the truth that the marriage was over and he didn't want to give up smoking. Her mother, Julie, added that money was likely another factor. With almost $600,000 in life insurance sitting in Jody's name, she believed Mark thought he could live comfortably off the payout after her death. As of 2025, Mark Galante remains behind bars in a New South Wales correctional facility. With a minimum sentence of 20 years, he will not be eligible for parole until around 2026. He has not appealed his conviction, and his guilty plea, along with the overwhelming evidence, effectively closed the case. In the years since, Jody's family worked tirelessly to honour her memory. They have shared their story publicly, both to remember Jody and to highlight the warning signs of domestic violence that culminated in her tragic death. They also became involved with the Homicide Victim Support Group and have worked to establish a foundation to help other families facing the financial and emotional toll of long court proceedings, offering support with travel, accommodation, and other costs. Jody's sister, Tina, who took on the role of raising Zayla, described the emotional shift after Mark was finally sentenced. That night, she came home from court and simply held Zayla in her arms, knowing no one would ever take her away again. At first, Zayla called her Mummy Tina, keeping Jody's memory alive as Mummy Jody. Over time though, it became simply Mum. Tina admitted that the first time she heard it, it felt like being stabbed in the heart because she wasn't Jody, and Jody should have been there. But at the same time, it was a beautiful sign that Zayla felt safe and loved. It meant Tina was doing her job, giving her niece the stability she so desperately needed. And so, while Jody's life was cruelly cut short, her memory lives on, in her daughter, in her family's work to support others, and in their determination to make sure her story is never forgotten. With Mark eligible for parole in 2026, that terrifyingly is just around the corner. I can only hope he is never granted release, and that he remains behind bars for much longer for what he did. Sadly, he most likely will walk free again, despite not only taking away the life of his beautiful wife, but also of his unborn child. 27 years for 2 lives lost is actually despicable, and once again, another child finds herself losing both her parents, one to murder and one to prison. Now, growing up without her mum, I truly hope Zayla is doing well, but being surrounded by the love and strength of Jody's family, especially her sister Tina, who stepped so selflessly into that motherly role, I'm sure she has been given the care and stability she deserves. And as always, my heart goes out to them all, and rest in peace, Jody Galante. Thanks so much for listening to True Crime with Ellie Mack, with me, Ellie Mack. And a special thanks to our members who you see on screen now. Your support means so much and really helps keep the channel going. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else, a rating and a follow really help the show grow. See you next time.